Hi, this is Kenny Albert. You're listening to the Broadway Hat Podcast with your host, Kyle Hall, the #1 podcast for all things Rangers hockey.
Welcome back to the Broadway Hat Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Hall, and another week has gone by, and the New York Rangers have still not hired a head coach yet, but there's rumors swirling, obviously, constantly around this job, but coaches are going. Teams are filling up. Right now, I think there's only two big spots open right now, is the Flames and the Rangers. So the Rangers have waited long enough. We'll see what they do here. But there was rumors this last weekend of Patrick Waugh possibly being interviewed after winning the Memorial Cup with the Quebec Remparts. But reports from Molly Walker out of the Post say that the Rangers are not looking at him. I heard this last weekend, a ton of chatter from a lot of people who were on boots on the ground there at the Memorial Cup that Waugh really wants an NHL job. That pretty much he's going to leave. I believe he's leaving Quebec after the season, or he's going to step back in the GM job because they're going to start a rebuild there. And he wants another crack at the NHL. He wants another run at it. So he's going to be left with two spots now, but the reports are the Rangers apparently are not interested in him. He is interested, from what I've heard, in the Rangers, but obviously it takes two teams to make a deal or two groups to make a deal. So you could be interested all you want in a job. If they don't want to hire you, you're not going to get it. So that leaves us with Pierre Laviolette once again as the guy who's been there for the longest, kind of hanging out there as a front runner, quote unquote. And you have Hines, who just came into the picture last week when Nashville fired him for Burnett, but he's got a long history there with Chris Drury going back to the BU days. But I don't see him as a great hire. I don't know. He hasn't won anywhere. Laviolette's got Stanley Cup. He's made long playoff runs. Hines has never won a playoff series. Struggled at times in Jersey. Struggled this last season in Nashville. I just don't know. Defensive coach, I don't know where he fits in. And then you have Knobloch. I think he's the guy who I've wanted the whole time, but I just don't know what. I think if they were going to hire him, they would have hired him already. I think they would have promoted him already. Obviously, the Dubas deal now in Pittsburgh has somewhat of a slim chance of Sullivan leaving there, but I think he said that he wants him to stay. So I think Mike Sullivan staying in Pittsburgh, especially with the Leafs saying they want to hold on to Sheldon Keefe, so he's a guy who's also not going to be out there. So all these coaching candidates, Mike Babcock gets hired by Columbus now. He interviewed early on for the Rangers job. But all these coaching candidates are going away, and the Rangers are kind of sitting here still holding the bag, wondering what's going on. So again, I thought they'd have a coach by the NHL draft. That's at the end of the month. We'll see if that happens. I would think it happens by then, but who knows? Gallant, I thought was a pretty quick hire last time, but after he finished up the World Championships, boom, he was hired by the Rangers. So we'll see. I thought going into this weekend, from what I heard, Patrick Waugh was going to be the new front runner. Now I don't know what. Maybe John Hines is now because seems like he has the most momentum out of any of the candidates. I really don't know. I don't know where they're going to go with this. The other big news is Patrick Kane underwent hip surgery, which we all knew he needed hip surgery. I don't think people really knew the extent of how bad the injury was. He had to get a whole resurfacing of his hip, which is a major surgery. I talked to a sports medical medicine doctor about it after I saw it, and they said that it could be a long recovery. They said 4 to 6 months. His agent said 4 to 6 months. The medical advisor basically told me that 6 months is where, probably the quickest recovery. And then obviously he said skating and everything has put so much pressure on your hip. He doesn't know if this year is going to be a year that he can even play at the top level, a Patrick Kane level. So who knows what happens with him in free agency, but I would not mind the Rangers taking a flyer on him on a 1-year deal, maybe really incentive-driven, and then basically put him on long-term IR until the trade deadline. And you kind of just acquire Patrick Kane again for the playoff run. And I think that would be a great fit for the Rangers if they can do that with the salary cap issues they've had. If they can get him on a low-risk deal, just put him on LTIR for the entire season. And once cap opens up, as the year goes on, you accrue your cap there, kind of like this year. You accrue it right into Patrick Kane. So maybe that's a deal that the Rangers get done and gives Kane a place to rehab for the year and gives him, lets his family stay in New York for a while. So I think that would be a win-win for both sides. And I have a good article coming out this week on BellyUpSports.com with some free agent targets for the Rangers and who they can look at this July 1st. And I think a guy who most Rangers fans would love to have back, he's going to be at the top of my list, because Jesper Fast. I think the Rangers can right a wrong they made a couple years ago. And according to his market value, he should be right back in that $2 to $3 million range, and that's a spot where the Rangers can really, that's as high they can go. And I think they've had a hole in the right side since he's left, and I think he can come in and fill in on that right side, and that'd be a complete threat to the kids, to Kakko there. And I think Foss can play up and down the lineup, but I think when Panarin played with him, it really had a great season with him on his wing. So he's a guy who'll go in and get pucks, go to the dirty spots. They need that opposite Panarin. And he could be a cheaper option than maybe trading someone, or, I throw out there, a couple trades recently. But I think if you can acquire someone, obviously, through free agency without giving up assets, it's a lot better. So we'll see. We'll see what the Rangers do there. Obviously, backup goaltending is a question mark. The sixth defense spot, obviously Ben Harper is under contract for another year, but is he the sixth defenseman? They bring in another guy there. Is Leroy Hayek still going to hang around? He's an RFA. So there's a lot of question marks there. So look out for that article. And also, we have some great interviews coming up. We have the NHL draft coverage coming up. We got bringing all of our NHL draft guys back from the last couple of years. We have some great analysts that have come on. So working on setting up all those interviews and getting that all set for the draft. We have some great interviews already lined up and already in the can from some former players for the summer. So very excited to share that with you. And this week, we have a great guest joined by former New York Ranger and U.S. Hockey Olympian Steven Kampfer came on and joined the show. So great interview with Steven, Michigan legend, played a ton of years in Boston too. So a lot of maybe you'll have some Boston Bruins fans tuning in this week. So welcome to the show. And it was great to sit down with him and talk with him. He's a guy who I've really liked for a bunch of years now. So it's great to get him on. And his interview is brought to you by D Sports Alliance. So if you've not heard of D Sports Alliance, it's Locker Token. It's a Web3 ecosystem built for professional sports industry. Leagues, teams, service providers, and the public can collectively own and host and govern the sports chain network. So if you're into crypto, if you're into blockchain, this is the premier one for sports. So it's a sports-specific infrastructure and applications offered through decentralized ownership with a white label plug and play model for professional sports organizations that get into Web3. They just had agreed like this morning to a deal with the Oshawa Generals, where basically they're gonna have control. People are gonna have control and inside information on this team. And they're going to be able to go in these chats, and then the team's going to put out certain information to just a closed user group based off of their agreement with D Alliance Sports here. And basically, if a guy is injured, if a guy's struggling, whatever it is, they will communicate that with you, which is great. So almost like you have an ownership or a stake in this team, and it's very cool. I'm learning more and more about this, and I got into fantasy hockey a couple years ago, and through blockchain, and it's great. It's the future, and Steven Kampfer's involved in it, and we actually have a couple interviews coming up with guys also involved with it. So very excited for them to present this interview and to continue to work with them. And so make sure you go check them out. They have an app and everything. So it's D Sports Alliance. Go check them out on Twitter, and it's the future. It's the future of sports. It's everything's crypto now. So it's great to get him on and get some of these guys on and talk about it. So, and now let's enter an interview with Steven. All right, we're now joined by former New York Ranger, just wrapped up his 14th pro season, Steven Kampfer. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. 14, that's a long time.
I saw the eyes roll there. 14, you have to think back.
It doesn't necessarily correlate to how I feel. So it's crazy to hear that number. I think when you spend a lot of time hurt or not playing, you don't think of years going by as fast as they do.
What year you feel? You're like 8, 9, or 22?
I honestly, it was funny. I just, when we got done this year, I told my wife, I was like, I feel like I'm in probably like year 7, to be honest, like just with playing and everything like that. And, obviously being an extra for a lot of years. And then, my first couple of years, I think my first 3 years, I played a total of 50 games total. I was just hurt or, and come back from an injury, get hurt again. So it doesn't really process that you've played 14 years. And the body still feels like I'm 25. So, ride it out as long as I can.
I love it. I love it. Hey, that's a lot more years then. That's
Yeah.
a lot left in the tank.
A lot left in the tank. Management doesn't think that, but you got a lot left in the tank.
For all you GMs out there, a lot left in the tank. Feels
A lot left in the
25.
tank. Exactly.
Growing up in Ann Arbor, I got to ask, who was your favorite team growing up? Who's your favorite player?
Well, you know what? I grew up obviously playing for Little Caesars. And we had a thing there where we couldn't wear anything over number 20. So, my favorite player growing up was Peter Forsberg. I love the rivalry of Colorado, Detroit. Sorry, I got a thunderstorm going on behind me. Florida summers for you. So I grew up in the height of the rivalry. So it was always one of those things for me where, everybody was a huge Detroit Red Wings bandwagon fan, because of the Cups. And then I went to a game and I watched Peter Forsberg play with my dad, and I was like, this guy is what hockey's all about. And I was probably 7, 8 years old, because he could skate, he could dangle, he could play physical, he could do anything out there. And I always loved his game. So he was definitely my favorite player. My close second was Nick Lidstrom.
I thought Nick Lidstrom would be the answer. That's what I feel like any guy in that area, especially defenseman. I don't know if you're a defenseman growing up or not, but I feel like he was like the guy.
Yeah, he was definitely the guy. He was the guy, because obviously, the cups that they won in 97, 98, he was so good. Vladimir Konstantinov at that time was the guy too, just because of the hits.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, for me, it was always Peter Forsberg. He was the whole reason, like, I wanted to switch to white tape. It was a lot of stuff when I was a kid.
And you end up going to Michigan, which I think Ann Arbor kid. I mean, was that the dream?
Well, I grew up in Jackson, which is I was born in Ann Arbor. Okay. So like when it says I'm from Ann Arbor, like when I filled that out when I was getting drafted, at the time it said, where were you born? And I was born in Ann Arbor, and I grew up in Jackson, which was a half hour away. So I was like right in between. If you take 94 West and 127 connects, literally 30 minutes from East Lansing and 30 minutes from Michigan. So like my town was basically half the kids went to Michigan State, half the kids went to Michigan. And it was kind of like, all right, when you're a kid, choose your allegiance. And, I was really fortunate. My mom played golf at Michigan. So I always had, Michigan hockey games. And then my entire dad's side of my family went to Ohio State. So I always had
man,
the big rivalry, the big split household. So I was very fortunate that, when I was 15 years old, and I was getting recruited, Michigan came to the table, wanted me to come there. And, it was a no-brainer for me. It came down between Michigan State, and Boston University, and Notre Dame, were the 4 that I was really interested in. And, I always thought to myself, go to Michigan and get to wear the winged helmets, play at Yost. And honestly, it was a dream come true to go play for Red, and play for Michigan, and be so close to home.
Your teammate's one of my favorite Rangers. I still hate the fact that they traded him, Carl Hagelin. I love Carl Hagelin.
Yeah, he was, we after I graduated college, I lived with him in the summers for a couple of years, because his parents had an apartment there from when they were flying from Sweden. So they had a couple extra bedrooms. He was honestly, when he first got there, he knew a little bit of English, but you could just tell like how hard he worked, how great he was as a person, as a player, how fast he was. And I mean, obviously it shows he's, still playing today. Well, up until this year. So he's had a heck of a career, and he won a cup, and, it's great for him.
He's one of those guys, obviously the Rangers haven't won a cup in 30 years, but those favorite Rangers, I'm happy they won a cup. Like he's one of those guys I was like thrilled, even though I hate the Penguins teams, but like I was happy for him. Like another guy like Zuccarello, like I would love to see him win a cup. Like another like guy who just was like a heart and soul guy in the Rangers.
Yeah, and you know what? Those guys, they were best friends too, which was just crazy. Them and Broussard, and I think for those guys, like they put in the time, and obviously, like when we were in New York, we had star-studded teams, and um, I would say we just underachieved at certain times of the year, which was unfortunate because of you look at the teams that we had and um, the chemistry that was in the locker room. I think it was one of those things where guys, I think when you look back on it, it's one of those things, especially, you think of Hank and how great of a career he had was, a step that we should have taken a little bit further.
Talk your draft day. Any good draft day stories? You taken fourth round in 2007 draft by the Anaheim Ducks.
Well, I can say this now because I'm well past the drinking age, but the night before we had this thing called spring term in college, where we would work out right after the season ended. School would normally end around mid-April, end of April, and then we'd have like 3 weeks off, and then we'd start spring training, and we would work out. It was a 8 week class, 8 weeks of classes, but the classes were obviously a lot shorter. It was basically just to get guys caught up on credits that if you were just taking 12 credits a year, to just get a couple more and just kind of make it so then the next year you didn't have to take as many classes during the hockey season. So we were in the middle of spring term. We had just finished. It was round draft day. My agent asked me if I wanted to go to Columbus, and I was like, absolutely not. I'm like, I don't want to go. So that night we went out on campus. We were at a bar and had a few too many drinks. And then I woke up the next day to a phone call at about 12:15 from my agent. Our family advisor at the time was my agent for a long time. Woke up to a phone call from him telling me that I just got drafted. And I thought I was dreaming. I was like, I got home at like 4 a.m. I have no idea what's going on. And I woke up to that. And then 5 minutes later, my mom and dad were calling me, telling me that I got drafted. And I'm just like, yeah, I know. And they're like, what do you mean? Like, this is awesome. And I'm like, I'm still trying to piece together like what's going on in like from last night right now. And then we went, myself, a couple of college teammates, we drove back to Jackson, and my parents, at the time had a boat on Clark Lake in Michigan. So my family was out there. My cousins drove into town. My aunt and uncle, my mom, my dad, were all there, and we just continued drinking for the rest of the night. And needless to say, I think Monday morning rolled around. It was a tough workout.
I'm trying to think who I had on. He was a Canadian guy, and he got drafted. And he's like, to the military? What are you talking about? Back in the 80s, he's like got a phone call. It's like, he got drafted. He's like, to the military? Where?
Yeah.
What's happening?
You're trying to figure out what's going on. You're like, what? You're like, what'd you say? And like at the time, like I honestly, I didn't have that good of a freshman year. So I was like, I honestly didn't think I was going to get drafted at all. Cause I went from juniors having a pretty good last year in juniors to freshman year. We had a star-studded team. We had like 5 first-round draft picks on the back end, and I was playing like 5th, 6th role, second power play, and I was like, man, I put up like 4 points. Like, there's no chance I'm getting drafted. And then next thing you know, I was like 4th round, and I'm like, what? I was like, who took a flyer on me? So, I was very fortunate that like I said, I got drafted. I was with Anaheim for a couple of years before they traded me away. I didn't ever even play the game for them. Or in their system, but got traded away my senior year.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so you got traded away before you even got to go out there, huh? Didn't you get a trip to Disney World or Disneyland?
We did at development camps.
Okay,
yeah, so we got to do that. But my so at the time, after my junior year, I wanted to sign. I wanted to leave school after my junior year. So I had a long meeting with Red, And he was like, just give me one more year. Like, I think, just give me one more. I think you can do it. And I was like, I was kind of reluctant on it. I talked to my parents. I talked to my agent about it. I was pretty content on leaving right after we had lost to Air Force in the regionals. And my agent had made a call to Anaheim, kind of expressing my interest on it. And he said, or they had told him that they were going to lose their American Hockey League team that year because they were in Iowa at the time, that they weren't going to have a team. And my agent right there called me back and was like, absolutely not. You're not leaving school because they don't have anywhere to place you. If you're not going to make the NHL, like you don't have anywhere to go. You're just going to be scattered throughout the league. And at 20 years old, you don't really understand what that means because you haven't been around the league enough. But basically what he was referring to is that I wasn't going to be somebody's top prospect because other teams were going to have their top prospects and they were going to play a lot. And basically you're just going to kind of get shuffled around, to wherever they thought you were going to fit the best, and that they couldn't technically like take care of your development at the time. So Red found that out. Red called me into his office the very next day and basically was trying to explain it to me. At the time, again, you're 20, you don't really want to hear that. You're just like, what are you talking about? Like, I can turn pro. And he just looked at me and was like, listen, I need you to come back. I want you to come back. And honestly, it was the best thing I ever did. I went back, had probably the best year of my career at Michigan, my senior year, just because I knew that I was bigger, I was stronger. I understood the game a little bit more. And honestly, it kind of made me a step better towards getting to the pro level where that seamless transition kind of made it a little bit easier. And then going up to the deadline that year, Anaheim, who at the time was Brian Burke, he was Brian Burke at the time, called my agent and was like, hey, like we have nowhere to place him after the season's over. My agent's like, all right. He's like, he's not going to sign. I'll just hold out until August at the time. And he's like, all right. So then we were playing, from the story that Peter Chiarelli told me, that we were playing in Michigan against Sault Ste. Marie, Lake State. Sorry, Lake State. We were playing Lake State, and that weekend he watched me Friday night play, and I was +6 with like 3 assists, and we beat them like 9-2. And the next day, I got a phone call on my way to the rink from Peter Chiarelli welcoming me to the Boston Bruins. And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, oh, is that your game last night? Like, we just traded for you. And I was like, isn't the deadline today? He's like, yeah. He goes, we just traded for you at the deadline. And I was like, I was so confused because I had never been traded before. And he's like, all right, well, hey, go finish the rest of your season and we'll talk to you after the season was over. And then literally, I think it was like 2.5 weeks later, our season ended. And on the bus ride back from Fort Wayne, Indiana, I had signed my contract and I left the next morning.
Jeez, no time.
So it was no time. It was crazy. I flew out to Boston and on the way we went.
Well, the next year you make your NHL debut. I guess walk me through that day and the nerves and everything leading up to that.
I was fortunate that I had 2 practices before my first game because Mark Stewart had broke his hand. Mark Stewart had broke his hand. I was down in Providence. So I got up there and I had 2 full practices with the team. So like that kind of eased the nerves a little bit. Just kind of being around the guys and kind of understanding what's going on. And then the first game was against the Islanders and I was paired with Dennis Seidenberg. And I just remember before the game just being really nervous because like it's your first game. You're just like trying to figure out what's going on. And Sean Thornton came up to me, sat down, and he goes, you know why you got called up? And I was like, no idea. And he's like, because you're playing well down there. He's like, whatever you're doing down there, do it up here. He's like, there's a reason why they called you up because of what you're doing down there. And so my first shift, like I think like I started the game, first shift, I had a hit. hit the post, and I got blown up all in a matter of like 40 seconds. And I was like, basically like, welcome to the NHL. Like, this is incredible. And then, I don't think I spent I went down for like a conditioning assignment after I tore my knee in like February for like 2 games. And then, but after that, I was up the entire year.
Yeah, and you go in the locker room and you walk in and Chara's sitting there. Like how like is that a little bit of a like a welcome to the NHL too? Like you see that like 6'8" gargantuan sitting there?
Well, I was fortunate during training camp that he was my defense partner the entire training camp. So I was really fortunate that I had gotten to know Z a little bit during camp and kind of pick his ear. And then I was around a lot. I was around that team up until the end of training camp. It was like one of the last couple cuts that year. So I was around the team up until they flew to Czech Republic. And then, when I came back in, it was kind of like, you're kind of you're reacquainting yourself to everybody else that's around. But it was, I mean, obviously you're nervous because you're playing with a Norris Trophy winner. You're playing with arguably one of the best at the time offensive defensemen. So you're like, all right, like all I want to do is not screw up anything that's going on. But I was really fortunate that I had Dennis Seidenberg was my first defense partner to kind of settle everything down. And then probably 10 games in, I moved up and I started playing with Z. And I was just like, this is crazy right now. Like like one of those pinch me moments that you're playing with Zdeno Chara in the National Hockey League. And yeah, it was crazy. I mean, I was fortunate. I was his teammate for 5.5 years. So it was awesome.
And then how crazy is it this year? You'll watch the Bruins team, how good they were. And then you look up front and it's still those same guys in the locker room with you and Krejci, Marchand, and Berge. Yeah. I mean, like crazy. Yeah. It's still, I mean, over a decade ago. It's crazy.
Well, it's crazy. It just shows how good those guys are and how well prepared they are, how well they take care of their bodies. Honestly, I don't think you can ever you'll never hear somebody say a bad word about Patrice Bergeron or David Krejci. And honestly,
you might about Marchand.
Honestly, though, like if you actually know Brad, like he's one of the greatest people in the world. He'll take his shirt off his back for anybody he cares about. Like he's a great guy. He's one of those guys that fans hate to not have him on their team, but they would love to have him on their team because he's that it factor. And honestly, like, we were rookies together. He had played a couple years in the minors and we both were rookies the same year. And honestly, to watch his game go from playing on the fourth line to being an NHL superstar, you could just tell he had that drive, that it factor, that he knew what he had to do to make himself really good and really relevant. But it was one of those things like he just progressively got better and better and better over time. And Bergeron, took him under his wing and helped make him the player that he is.
And then you guys go on the run there and win the Stanley Cup. So I mean, pretty solid ending to your first year.
I gotta tell you, I thought I was going to win 14 in a row. I thought it was really easy.
One of those things. This is pretty easy, huh? One
I literally thought, I was like, this is a piece of cake. Like I'm like, I don't know how you guys are all struggling here. Like we just did a 1-for-1. Like this is pretty easy. And then I don't know if we made it out of the first round. Well, New York, we made it to the second round the one year, but I don't know if we made it past the second round until 2019, or I made it out of the second round until 2019. And then that year we lost in Game 7 in the finals, and you realized how freaking hard it was to get back, or just to, it was funny because, I love watching playoff hockey. I went to the Panthers game last night where they clinched Game 4. And you just realize how hard it is just to get out of the first round. And then at that point, it's a battle of attrition. It's who's clicking, whose secondary scoring's on fire, and whose goaltender's hot at the time. And, it was crazy. Like the fact that we lost in Game 7 in Boston, that one will sting for a long time.
That year, the Cup was the Tim Thomas year, right? That's when he just like,
that was when
he didn't allow a goal. Like it was crazy. Like he was insane.
He was really good. I mean, that team was just, that was a different animal built. I mean, you look at, we had Luch, Horton, Gregory Campbell, Chris Kelly, Rich Peverly. Tyler Seguin wasn't even playing until the third round. That's what people don't realize. Like, and then your back end, you had Z and Seidenberg were on a pairing. Then you had Ferentz and Boychuk, and then you had Caberlet and McQuaid. And it was like what? How are you getting through that? Like, and the thing was, is like we traded for Caberlet at the deadline, and he came in and was on our first power play, and Caberlet was probably playing 14 minutes a night, and he went from like 25 to 14. That's just how deep we were as a team. And that's not a knock on him. That's just like, that just shows how
How
deep
good it
we
was.
were.
Yeah. Yeah.
We were just so deep that like there was nothing, there's no additional ice time that was available.
And that's like when the world got introduced to Marchand too. Cause like you said, it was really his first year and he just lit up those playoffs too. Guy was scoring a goal a night. Yeah. He was scoring a goal a night and getting people's faces. And it was like the introductory to the NHL. Like, this is going to be a pain in the ass for the next decade or so.
Well, think about this. He was a 20 goal scorer and wasn't on the power play.
Yeah.
For his first like 4 years, he wasn't on the power play his first 4 years, and he was still putting up 20 goals. That's
Crazy.
what people don't realize.
Crazy. That team was, I mean, that team was so well constructed. And they beat the Rangers in a playoff series a couple years later with that same team before they kind of really broke it up. But I mean, that team was so good. You looked at those series though, what it was like 3 7-game series too. Like it was a real,
So it was
a real battle.
Montreal was our toughest one. Montreal, we won in overtime in game 7. That was when Nathan Horton scored in overtime. In game 7. And then we went to Philly, and the year before they had gotten reverse swept by Philly. So that was kind of a statement series. And then Tampa, we won in game 7 on a 1-0 game against Tampa. And then up until game 7, the home team had won every single game in that Vancouver series, which was crazy. And honestly, you hate to say this, but the thing that woke everybody up was the Aaron Rome hit on Nathan Horton. And that's what basically, I mean, no pun intended, but it woke the bear up.
Was that the series? I think I saw Char talk about it. I think that was the series. Was that when he brought the melted ice from TD and put it on? Is that true? Right?
Melted it. Yeah, we had melted it before we left. So we had practiced at our practice rink and flew out, and they had melted the ice right after game 6.
And then he dumped it on the ice there and said, "We're home now." And then riots ensued afterwards. The whole city of Vancouver burned to the ground afterwards.
Well, it wasn't even near us. That's the thing. It's like it was downtown. Like the rink was right there, but they basically escorted us out of there. They're like, "You guys got to leave now," which was fine. We were like, "All right, see you guys later."
Yeah, let's go back to Boston. Go to Boston. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So the next year you get traded deadline to Minnesota. I guess, did you see that trade come in, or was that kind of out of nowhere?
No, I knew that trade was coming. Kind of the writing was on the wall after that year when they traded Caberlet for Joe Corvo, who was a good player, good person. But I just kind of saw the writing on the wall for myself, just because like after the summer I hurt my knee before playoffs, had surgery right before playoffs, so I didn't play, wasn't even available for playoffs. And then went the entire summer, they traded for him. So I was like, all right, like they really don't think that my knee is going to come back the way that they thought it was after I had the surgery. And then my second game of training camp, or no, it was like my third or fourth game. I played every game up to that point. I was playing pretty well. Finally starting to get my knee back to like where it was feeling good. And then I just pulled up, and a guy went through my other knee and blew my MCL and my meniscus out of my left knee. And so I had surgery the very next day, and I don't think I played another game until probably 6-8 weeks later. And at that point, it was kind of like, all right, you're having double knee surgeries at 22 years old. It was tough just because I was like, all right, like you're trying to figure out where you're gonna play, because you're looking at the NHL roster, you're like, not there. Are they gonna send me down? They got guys down there that they're trying to develop too. So my agent and I kind of talked about it. We are like, all right, let's get healthy and see what's going to go on. So I got healthy. I played a little bit, and then I was a healthy scratch for probably like 20 games in a row in Boston. Hadn't played, just bag skating the whole time. And I was just like, we don't know how my knee's going to be if I'm not playing. And so we talked to the coaches about it. We talked to like basically like, when are you going to get in? And they're just like, oh, well, the team's playing well right now. So I was like, all right, well, can I just go to Providence and play some games? Sent me down. I felt really good. Played about 5 or 6 games down there. Came back up, didn't play again. And I was like, man, I just went down. I played well. And then it was getting close to the deadline. My agent was like, I think we just need to ask to get moved. And so then Boston was reluctant on it. Peter was real reluctant on it. Like, he's like, I'm not going to trade him. Like, I'm not going to trade him. And then finally, what it took was me getting scratched, or I got scratched. I was on the 9th floor one night up in Boston. And Peter came up to me and was like, hey, I'm going to send you down on this long road trip. Because the team was going out west. He was like, we're going to send you down. And I just looked at him. I was like, just trade me. And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, well, he's not. I was like referring to Claude Julien at the time. I was like, well, he's not going to play me. Like, I've been healthy. He's clearly not going to put me in the lineup. So like, if the head coach is not going to play me, just trade me. And he's like, all right, well, let me have a conversation with him and I'll let you know. So I went down and I played well in Providence for like another 5 games. And then it was the night before the deadline. And I just remember Don Sweeney was at the game, and I saw him after the game, and he was like, hey, he's like, keep your phone on you tomorrow. And I was just like, right there, I'm riding the bus back from Manchester, and I'm on the bus, and I'm just like, texting my agent. I'm like, I'm for sure getting traded tomorrow. He's like, why? And I told him to comment, and he goes, yeah, you're getting traded. And then the next day I found out I was getting traded to Minnesota.
Yeah. See, you land in Minnesota, but I got to ask you about in 2014, you signed with the Rangers on July 1st.
Yeah.
And it's very strange. You're very strange ride with the Rangers. You go through training camp, and then they move you right before the start of the season. Same thing. What happened there?
I have no idea. Honestly, I couldn't tell you to this day. It was one of the weirdest things I've gone through. So I played that training camp. I think we had like 7 exhibition games, and myself and Matt Hunwick were kind of, maybe Koska was in there too. We were all kind of battling for that 7th spot, like back and forth the entire camp of who was going to be the 7th defenseman. And I remember it was the last night we were playing in Philly, and the 3 of us were dressing, and Matt and I were playing together. And Matt and I trained together the entire summer. I played with Matt in college. I played with his brother Sean in college. So like, we were really good friends, and we were just kind of both rooting for each other at that point. Like, if one of us is going to make, like, if somebody's going to make it, it's going to be one of us. And I remember after the game that night, we got back into New York, and all I said was I had a meeting the next day at like 1 p.m. And I was like, okay, well, I know waivers is at noon. So I'm like, this is interesting. But it wasn't the last day before rosters were submitted. And I remember the next day I show up to the rink at 1:00, and I was the only guy there.
The only guy in the whole building, like in the whole
guy, yeah.
That's not a good start.
Yeah, right. I'm just like, okay, this isn't good. So I walk in, and well, like, we had like treatments and stuff like that. So like, guys were in there getting treatments, but I was like the only guy that like wasn't a regular that was like there. And I'm like, okay, it's gonna be good. And then so I walk up to Jeff Gorton's office, and Elaine Vigneault and Jeff are sitting there, and I'm like, okay, this could be good. And then AV looks at me. He's like, well, how do you think you played last night? And I was like, I thought I played pretty well. He's like, I did too. He's like, if you had to rate your scale out of your camp out of a 1 to 5, where would you give it? And I was like, I don't know, 3.5, 4, like, trying to be like modest about it. He's like, yeah. He's like, I'd say like 4, 4.5. I thought you were really good in camp. I thought you showed that you can play in this league. And then he goes, but we traded you.
Vigneault said that to you?
Yeah. And I was like, wait, what? And I'm like, okay. I'm like, what just happened here? And then next thing I know is I used to always joke to my dad that I was like, I'm like, there's him. Like, I used to always joke to my dad when I was getting traded from Boston. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna get traded to Florida. I'm like, it's gonna happen. And I'm like, just because they didn't have defensemen. And then this happened, and I asked them where I was going. They're like, you're going to Florida. And I'm like, no, I'm not. And they're like, yeah, you're going to Florida. Like, we just traded you. You're going to Florida. Or we're like, we just finalized the trade. You're going to Florida. And I'm just like, I just remember sitting there. I'm like, what the fuck? So I call my dad when I'm leaving the rink, and I'm like, Dad, I got traded. My dad's like, no, you didn't. Like, stop. You're like, stop messing around. I'm like, no, seriously, like, get on Twitter, get on anything. I just got traded to Florida. And then the next day I flew out and was with the Panthers.
Yeah, I had to ask because I'm like, what happened there that he,
Yeah.
and I guess you had to go through waivers to get back to go to Hartford. Is that what the deal was?
When I came back
No,
after the
no,
trade,
no. I'm saying for like before that season started, would they have to move you through waivers to get to Hartford or no?
yeah.
So then they trade. So they probably were trying to figure out what to do
Yeah. So
then.
they
Yeah,
traded me to Florida. And
yeah.
then yeah, so I was so I was in Florida for 2.5 years, and then of
And they
all places, I got traded back to New York.
they trade back for you,
I
and
couldn't
Vigneault's
believe
still
that.
there. Vigneault's still there.
I couldn't believe it. I honestly, I started laughing when I found out. I was like, I walked in and I saw Rammer for the first time, and I was just like, I'm like, what is going on here? And he just started laughing. I'm like, honestly, what's going on? Like, did I just get loaned for 2 years until my deal was over? And then you guys were just like, oh, we'll bring him back. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I got traded for that. Yeah.
So talk about your time in Florida there. Gerard Gallant, you played for him for a couple years down there. Obviously, Rangers just let him go. Why do players like him so much, and why doesn't he stay in a place for longer than a year and a half, than 2 years?
All right. So I'll preface by saying this. Like, Gerard Gallant's one of my favorite coaches I've ever played for. Hands down. He's just a very, very personable guy. The first day I met him, um, you know, just he was funny, he's quick-witted. And honestly, he just cared about everybody. He cared about everybody the same. It didn't matter if you were at the time Aaron Ekblad, Barkov, Huberdeau, or if you were Derek McKenzie or Sean Thornton. Like, he cared about everybody the same. And his whole thing was just be 100% honest to me and tell me how you feel. Tell me if something's bothering you, because the more he knows, like he would say, the more I know, the more I can help you. And honestly, it was, I loved playing for him. He was awesome. I mean, he would get in your face and yell at you and scream at you if like you weren't doing something. But he cared so much about the guys, and the guys respected him because of how much he played and how much, um, you know, how good of a coach he was. Um, the trading, or the him getting fired in Florida was just a power shift in Florida. I don't think they would have fired him had Dale Talon not gotten, I guess how they put it, they moved him away from being a
Operations.
general manager for Tom Rowe. And when Tom Rowe came in, Tom Rowe tried to dismantle that team the quickest way he could. And I had Tom before, and I knew Tom didn't really like me. And I was Tom's first trade out of there, and that was back to New York. And then I know that Turk and I got along really well. And Turk and I had like a long conversation after I got traded, because I had a conversation with Tom Rowe before, where he had put me on waivers to go to put me on waivers, and then didn't send me down, and then told me that, hey, I just wanted to let you know that I'm just showing you that nobody wanted you, but you're not going to go anywhere, and you're fine, and you have my word for it. The very next day I got traded to New York.
Jeez.
So Turk and I had that conversation because I called him, or when I got traded, I was at the rink, or I wasn't at the rink. I found out I was actually on the golf course with my dad, down in Florida. I found out I got traded. And then Turk called me when I was driving to get my stuff. And he was like, didn't you just have a meeting with Tom yesterday? I was like, yeah. And I told him everything that happened. And then literally a week later is when Turk got let go in Carolina. So it was crazy. It was a complete power shift and power struggle there.
Well, now he's over in Germany, so maybe it's a void.
Who's that?
Tom Morell, right? Is he over in Germany now?
I have no idea. I
Yeah.
honestly, after that whole encounter, I was just like, all right, if I play for this guy again, I was like, I'm really doing something wrong in this world.
You play with Yager there, obviously, all-time legend on and off the ice. Any good Yager stories?
So I have a few. So Yag's he's a very interesting dude, but like we sat next to each other in Florida, and he had like obviously this shrine of 2 stalls, but like ours were right next to each other in the game rink in Florida. And it was awesome because like you grow up and you're watching them and you're watching the salute and all that stuff, and it was great. But he used to always bring Dunkin' Donuts, like 3 muffins in the morning, and like the traveler size things that you take to like an office meeting.
Yeah, like the jug.
Have that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he would have that every morning. And one day, like Sean Thornton used to always just give it to him, and about how much coffee he would drink. And then we get into playoffs, and Lent just happens, and he's a very religious guy, and he just gave up coffee for Lent. We're like, we're going on a playoff run here, and you're giving up coffee of all things, like. And he would just sit there and like wouldn't take any energy pills, nothing like that. He was like, I'm getting off of any caffeine for Lent. And then one game he was just sitting there, and I think he was messing. I'm pretty sure he was messing around. He like acted because Thordy was giving him a bunch of shit, and I'm pretty sure Thordy was like bobbing his head, acting like he was sleeping, because like Thordy was like, can you just wake up and like take some caffeine pills? So like I look over at him before a game, and he's like bobbing his head down, like messing around. But like that's just how he would mess around with guys. Like he had that like very good sense of humor.
And then a guy who I say, and Barkov was obviously there too, and I feel like he's so underrated still.
Yeah, I mean, he was insane. He was so good. Obviously, you know what? The best thing that ever happened to him and Huberdeau was playing with Yager for those 2 years, because he taught them how to use each other, how to, use their weight, use their size, use their skill. So I think Yager's got a lot of what's going on with Alexander Barkov, because he was still very young when we were there.
So you go back to the Rangers. You do the whole circle there, the whole roundabout way. I got to ask you about Lundqvist playing in front of him. How cool was that?
It was, it was awesome. I mean, obviously, future Hall of Famer. It was incredible to play for him. Obviously, the amount of respect he has in that locker room, around the league. He just, he did everything the right way. Never seen a guy have a bad hair day in his life. But honestly, I mean, he was a great person. He cared about everybody. And just to be able to share a locker room with him or share the ice with him was incredible.
And you were there for during Winter Classic too. They just announced that the Rangers are going to get a new, I guess, was it Stadium Series they call it, whatever, next year.
Now we had the Winter Classic at City, right? City Field.
Yeah, City Field. Yeah, it's actually a great picture of you playing baseball there, which is pretty funny.
Yeah.
But do players get pumped up for that, or is that more of a fan thing?
I think nowadays, I don't get me wrong. I think anytime you play outside, it's incredible. I think if you would have asked guys 10, 15 years ago, it meant a little bit more, because like we did grow up, like I guess I'm on the older echelon of things now. We did grow up playing pond hockey. We did grow up playing outside at like outdoor rinks when you were a kid. I don't know how many of these guys now did that, because hockey was so accessible in rinks. There's so many more rinks now where like these kids are just playing all the time. But I think it's something that I really do believe every team should get the opportunity to play in, because of how cool they are, just for the experience of not only the players, but the families and the whole week leading up to it. It's honestly incredible. And I mean, the New York Rangers they were A+, top notch, first class, how they treated not only our families, but our, your significant others. And they had everything all set up for them. They took them to the New Year's Eve, the ball drop at Times Square, all that stuff. And they had it all decked out, that are like the families had hotels downtown. Like it was incredible for them as much as it was for us.
I feel like, yeah, the Rangers, you always hear like how first class the organization is. They
Oh,
set everything up nicely, huh?
it's incredible. I mean, honestly, like the from top down, I mean, you think of Mr. Dolan and how he treats his, the staff, and how well the management is, the coaches are, and then the staff, and then you go to MSG and how great those people are. Honestly, I can't say a bad word about the New York Rangers of how well they treated not only myself but my family.
Now you're there for the letter when it came out, that season where you guys went to the second round and then all these stars started started getting traded away. Rick Nash gets traded away. How tough was that? Like in that locker room, is kind of like seeing like, okay, the Winter Classic's over and now we're going to start trading everyone away.
Well, so it happened probably a little bit after that. But at the time, again, it was a roster that was built to really succeed, and we were just underperforming. And then all of a sudden, all of a sudden you're sitting there, and I had just broken my hand around the deadline, so I knew I wasn't getting traded. But I just remember sitting there, and I was working out one day, and it was myself, Kevin Shattenkirk. We had just sent Brendan Smith down to the minors. Shatty was done for the year. I was done for the year. Ryan McDonough was out with a broken hand at the time. And then all of a sudden on the ticker one day is we traded Rick Nash. The very next day we traded Nick Holden. And then 2 days later was the deadline. And then there goes JT Miller and Ryan McDonough.
Yeah.
And I just remember sitting there, and at that point, we had a bunch of guys up from Hartford. We had a bunch of new faces in there. And I just remember Shaddy, Quickie, and I were sitting there watching a game one night, and we're just like, I got to relearn everybody's names. Like, this is like training camp all over again, because it was just like guys were coming in, playing games, guys were going here, guys were going there. And then, they obviously dismantled everything. And then, obviously we missed playoffs by a lot that year. So I don't even think it was close.
Now, like when there was an actual, when I say a letter, Ranger fans know, an actual letter was sent out to the season ticket holders, right? It's like
there was a letter sent out to the league saying that we're done.
Mailing it in.
Yeah.
Like when that hits the locker room, like where guys are like, what the hell is this? Like what was that received like?
So we actually found out about it I forget where we were flying back from. We actually found out about it on a flight back from somewhere. We had just landed in New York, and we just found out about it because when we were landing, they told us that we had to sit on the plane for a couple extra minutes. And when we got off the plane, there was a helicopter landing, and it was Mr. Dolan, and he was there to pick up Jeff Gorton and AV and fly him to wherever he was. So we had to wait, because like as soon as this helicopter landed, those two got on and they were gone. And then that was when we found out about the letter, and we were just like, all right, so I guess we're going to trade everyone away.
I mean, to their credit, it was some good trades. The Rick Nash trade worked out great. I mean, the Rangers got Ryan Lindgren and Keandre Miller out of the deal. So, I mean, some of the trades that worked out well, and it did kickstart the rebuild that they're on now. But I can't imagine sitting there, I mean, a year removed from a playoff run where you should have been, that team could have made it to the conference finals easily. And then now you're looking at your captains traded and Rick Nash, who was, a franchise staples traded.
JT Miller's gone on to have a pretty heck of a career.
JT Miller was like a throw in that deal, which kills me too. That deal was awful. That was an awful deal.
who'd they get? Nemestikov and a first rounder.
Brett Howden, and then I think it was a second rounder for I don't know. But yeah, first round was Niels Lundqvist. So I mean, I guess they got some assets back, but not who you want from Ryan McDonough and TJ Miller.
Yeah, and I think I didn't understand the McDonough trade, honestly. Like, how do you trade your captain away? But great for him. He's gone on to win a couple cups. Yeah, I didn't understand that one. I didn't understand a lot of it at the time. I think I was still a little naive to the whole trading thing, even though I've been traded a couple times. Like that at the deadline, we were going to trade, obviously our big name guys, and they weren't necessarily rentals at the time. Like they still had term on their deals.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of, I think it was kind of just shedding it a little bit to kind of rebuild it. But then you look at what the Rangers have done lately, and I mean, like you said, they've, clawed their way back, and they've, figured it out a little bit.
And then to go full circle, you get traded back to Boston for your old teammate, Adam McQuaid.
Yeah, one of my good buddies when we were in Boston. That's what's crazy.
So, I mean, that's crazy. But I ask you, when you get back to Boston, there's a guy named Pasternak who's now there, added to this, unbelievable top six they have, and the guy scored 61 goals this year. What makes him so lethal?
He can shoot from anywhere. I don't even know, to be honest. He's got one of the best shots ever. But I think a lot of it is like he's got that natural ability to score, but at the same time he's works hard. Works on his shot a lot, works on his skating a lot. He's just very agile, and he sees the ice a different way. And I think obviously playing with Bergeron and Marchand, or I think a lot of this year he played with Krejci, is he has the ability to get open and find himself. But he also has got the ability to get the puck on net in spots that he knows the goalies aren't going to be. So, he's a great person, but he's an even better hockey player.
You make the jump to the KHL. Any crazy Russian stories?
Yeah. So that was kind of, to go there was basically to reinvent myself, just to go back and play meaningful minutes. It was more or less just to go over there for a year. And honestly, I loved it. I thought, obviously, the way Akbar treated us, not only myself, my family, the other imports, they treated us like we were an NHL team, flying everywhere, staying at nice hotels. So you hear these Russian stories that are a little crazy, but we didn't really have too many of them. The only one I really have is Par Lindholm and I. We were in Boston together, and my first weekend I get there, because I got there late because I had hand surgery at the end of my last year in Boston. So I got there in mid-August, and we're playing in Magnitogorsk, and I just found out I was going on this trip literally the morning that we were going. I thought I was not playing a game until we had our home exhibition series. And all of a sudden, a GM came up to me and was like, "We need you to travel. We want you to be around the team because you haven't been here for all training camp." So I had to hurry up, and I went upstairs and packed real quick at where we lived in Russia. It was called a Baza. We had an ice rink there, a weight room there, and then our apartments were right there. So everything was right there. And so I ran upstairs and I packed real quick, and I forgot toothpaste. And after the first game, I'm going back to the room, and I'm just like, man, I'm like, I can't believe I forgot toothpaste. So I go to Par, and I'm like, hey, can you just come with me? We got to go to this convenience store. And he's like, no. He's like, I'm not leaving with you. I'm like, dude, just please. I'm not going somewhere in Russia by myself right now. Like, I just got here 3 days ago. So we get in this car, we get Uber. They call it a Yandex over there, but we get in this like Uber. We drive to this convenience store. This guy are driving us not anywhere near where we're going on our app. And we're just like looking down at this thing. We're looking up at him. We're just kind of like following along. This guy speaks zero English. Drops us off in like an alley. And we're like, this is not where we're supposed to go. He goes, convenience store there. And it's like pointing straight ahead at us. And I'm just like, okay, I'm literally looking, it's like 200 yards away, literally like around the corner. I'm like, buddy, we just got dropped off in an alley. And so we get out and we start walking. And all of a sudden, Par and I we're just kind of laughing, just kind of joking around. We're like, all right, we're going to find this place. All of a sudden we look over and there's a stray dog and this thing starts growling. And I'm like, nope, not doing this. And I look at Parr and I go, if this thing gets up, we run as fast as we can. And he's like, yeah. We take about 5 more steps. He's growling a little bit more at us. And I'm just like, man, like, what's going on here? All of a sudden, this thing gets up and the two of us took off, booking it down this street. Like we were running as fast as we could, like we were Usain Bolt sprinting for 200 yards. We finally get to this convenience store. This dog's nowhere near us. Like I'm like thinking this dog's gonna bite one of us. We get to this convenience store and we get everything that we need, and then we're like, we're not leaving until we get in here, like until we leave. And then as our Yandex is pulling up, this guy, it's 1:00 in the afternoon. This guy is blackout beyond belief, and he's trying to steal bottles out of this liquor store, like wine bottles. And this guy's like yelling at us to stop him, and we don't understand what's going on. And we're just like, and I just remember getting in the Yandex, and we like look at the guy, we're like, we have no idea what you're saying. Like arms are up in the air. We're like, what are you talking about? The guy's trying to steal wine. Next thing we know is this guy's like running out from behind the counter to stop this guy. We walk out, and Parr and I look at each other and we're like, where the fuck are we? And like what in our life has brought us to this, like to here right now? Like we just got chased and now we're getting yelled at because somebody else is stealing. But other than that, like we had a great time. We had a great time over there. It was great. Honestly, I don't have a bad thing to say about it.
Did you try the Russian gas or no?
Nope.
No? Was it available?
No. I don't know. Honestly, I couldn't tell you. There was a lot of stuff that we never came encounter with as imports, especially in Kazan, because Kazan's very, very clean about it. Like if they would give you like a Dixie cup full of pills and you would ask them to see the pills and they would show you like all the bottles, and we had WADA test our team probably 7 times last year. I probably got tested 5 out of those 7, and nothing ever popped up. Like, so it was, so whatever they were doing, they were doing because it was clean business over there for them.
Well, you had a great year, and you turned that into the Olympics where you represented Team USA. How special was that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously a dream come true, because you never think that in your lifetime, especially, how many great players there are, that you're ever going to go to the Olympics. It was kind of one of those things. I was just right place, right time. Was fortunate that the NHL didn't go, and then was fortunate that Beezer and Quinny wanted me to play on the team.
And you score a goal there. Is that what's your favorite goal from your career? Was that it?
Yeah, I think that one, or the Stanley Cup against Carolina, the game 1. When I hadn't played in a couple games, coming out of nowhere and scoring. So it was great.
And then did you go to any of the events over there in Beijing, or did you just kind of hang out? And could you? I don't know what the protocol was.
Yeah, so we were obviously locked down because of COVID, but like where we were in Beijing, we just had we had hockey, speed skating, big air, figure skating, curling. I believe that was it. Anything else was a couple hours away. So those are the only sports that we really got to go to. But we would go to them quite a bit. We'd go to different ones and check it out. But a lot of it was like, once the tournament started, we played pretty much every other day. So you'd practice, and your practice times were always different based on where you were playing or what days you were playing. So you could have a practice one day at 10 o'clock and the next day it could be at 4 o'clock. So you didn't know. And like, you weren't going to go to an event before 4 o'clock, a 4 o'clock practice. So it was different, but it was honestly, it was one of those situations that was incredible because, obviously our group that we had there was very special with all the young guys. And then the older guys, we had a good time. After we had been eliminated, we all had to stay for an additional 9 days. So we had some fun.
Yeah, it was a tough exit there because you guys rolled through the prelims. You beat Canada, which was huge, which was awesome.
Yeah.
And then, was it a shootout, right? It was a shootout where you guys lost, which,
Yeah, they lost a shootout on the fifth shooter.
yeah, which, and Sochi
It should never come to
it
a
should never be a
shootout.
shootout. But then you look at Sochi and it's like the Oshie thing was like, memorable, but it's like, come on, quarterfinal, you can't do that shootout.
You got to play it out. Honestly, I'm a firm believer of that. And, I've said it since we were done. You got to play it out because like you're putting it down to a shootout. Like,
It's a skill
the
comp.
10 minutes, 3-on-3 was a lot too. Because you're so tired. And, but I mean, you should just play 5-on-5 until somebody scores. And honestly, that wasn't even, we didn't play anywhere near to our potential that game. I think everybody was a little nervous because of it, right? Like you're looking at it of like, you're looking ahead going, okay, like we might get into the medal round here and this is where it's at. And then, we just had some mishaps and, that's kind of hockey.
I think that was it. Manny Berniers that like didn't play at all in the 3-on-3, whatever it was. I remember like people giving Quinn heat about that. I think it was Berniers or was it Farrell that didn't play at all?
Farrell.
It was Farrell. Yeah, that's what.
Farrell played a little bit towards the end, but Matty Berniers played quite a bit because anytime Matty Berniers was on the ice in overtime, I was on the ice with him. And
so yeah, it was fair. I remember it was fair because he was leading the team in scoring. It's like, why isn't he out there on 3-on-3? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, Farrell. Yeah, but Farrell had that. I think he had all 6 points in the first game.
That's true. Yeah, he lit up China.
Yeah.
which was just a bunch of Americans and Canadians.
Yeah. But I mean, you know what? Farrell is a really good player, and yeah, I mean, but at that point, you can't fault Quinny because Quinny's feeling who's going that night, and if that's it's easy to sit back and look at it and be like, hey, why didn't you play so and so? But like at the same time, it's like, it is what it is.
So this last year, you signed back with Detroit. You end up the year in the Arizona organization. The whole thing with Arizona now about the whole hockey and relocating. What do you make of that?
I mean, it's crazy because of what's all transpired. The guys love it there. That's what's crazy is guys love playing in Arizona. Guys love, the situation. Like I honestly, like when I went out there, I don't have a bad thing to say about the Arizona Coyotes organization. I don't have a bad thing to say about like how they treated the players or anything like that. They were fantastic to myself and my family. I just think that with what's going on and Tempe not wanting an ice rink or you turned down $2.1 billion. I didn't understand that.
It's crazy. Yeah.
But I guess, they're happy with just ASU being there. I don't really understand that, but it'll be interesting to see what they do here in the next little bit with, I know that they're going to play in Arizona this year. And then kind of what they do going forward, but I don't know what's the best for the league at that point, right? Like, I think there's got to be an area or around Phoenix that you can put the team, because I think it's good for hockey to kind of spread it out and put it in southern climates. I mean, you look at Florida right now, you look at Dallas, you look at Carolina, you look at Vegas, like these are all southern market teams, and
yeah, and all have these new junior programs that are huge.
And hockey's growing, and you want to be able to put them in some southern markets to allow hockey to grow, and for Arizona's sake, and for the NHL, I hope that they keep the team there.
All right, so I got a couple questions before I let you go here. Some rapid fire questions for one, then I have a longer one at the end, but rapid fire for you. Biggest prankster you ever played with?
Zuccarello.
Was there a go-to move for him?
No, you just mess with guys all the time.
Favorite arena you played in?
And then in the NHL?
Anywhere. Your favorite arena?
I love Yost. There's something about it, just the fans sitting on top of the students cheering or whatever. And, you know, I think I love Montreal too. Something about Montreal is just the stadium's crazy. It's awesome to play in there.
Favorite road city?
Um, I got a couple different ones. So like I like Vegas because it's Vegas. I like I I like visiting New York City. I think it's a great city to visit for about 3 days. There's a lot of good restaurants. Um, Obviously, I like visiting Florida because I live here and everything like that now. Um, and I like Nashville too.
Okay. Did you have any? You have any superstitions?
I have a lot.
You have a
If you ask
lot.
my yeah, if you ask my wife, I got too many. I should probably tone them down, but I got a lot. Like for instance, like I have to tape my sticks the same I have to count how many strands I have on my stick. I have to put on the left side of my gear first. Probably tie my skates 15 times before a game.
15 times?
Yeah, I minimally. But it's different because like when I grew up skating, and we had a guy who did uh, speed skating, and he always talked about like ankle stability and like the ankle controlling the skate, and it was always like try to wear your skates as loose as possible because then your ankle controls how much of controls the skate and controls everything like that. So I can never have tight skates. Like my if I when I was a kid, I could almost like just slide my foot into my skate, and I've over the years I've tightened it up a little bit more. But like if it gets up to like closer to my ankle bone, like it's extremely loose. Like I can't stand when like it's tight around my ankle.
Okay. Any like pregame, like you like, like two water bottle squirts, what, like how crazy does
No,
that
nothing
get?
like that.
Okay.
No, no, nothing like that. Mine's just more. I call it a routine, and people call it a superstition.
Gotcha. So you don't realize you're doing it. You're just doing it.
Oh no, I realize I'm doing
Oh,
it.
okay. Okay. And if you don't do it, are you thrown off?
Oh, I think my head goes into a pretzel.
You're -2 before even going on the ice that night.
Oh, just I'm like, all right, well, there's a pizza.
All right. So I got to ask you, crypto is now the new thing, and you're involved with the D Sports Alliance now, and it's kind of the wave of the new future now for sports. So how did you get into that, and how's your experience been so far?
Yeah, so my one of the agents I worked with, Pat Charuco, he got me into it 2 years ago, or last year, I guess, when I was coming back from Russia. Um, and I didn't really know much about cryptocurrency. I had never really paid attention to it. I just kind of always thought it was, at the time, I thought it was a hoax. And then Pat kind of sat me down like this, kind of via Zoom, and we were just kind of had a conversation about it. And he's like, "Listen," he's like, "just try it and see what we can do." And so I got involved with it um, and started putting some money into it, just trying to see, everything like that. And then just started realizing that this is going to kind of be the new wave of how players can, more or less transfer money back from European cities and know that you're going to always have it and that it's going to be safe. And obviously you see the now with Bitcoin and everything like that, the fluctuations great, and you can NFTs, you can buy them, sports cards and everything like that, and make sure that you have all. So it's something that I was very interested in, especially trying to get money out of Russia, because obviously last year, SWIFT was shut down, and it was hard for all of us to get any money back for quite a long time. So obviously going into cryptocurrency was something that was accessible and was easy to do. So we could transfer money back easily going through cryptocurrency.
Yeah, I feel like, I'm involved in the fantasy side of it, and I talked to Ryan Malone about it, and he was big on trying to get me involved in it first, and he's like, yeah, guys can make money now off like their fantasy stats, and he's like,
Mm-hmm.
there's a whole new world now opening up, which it was just cool. It's very cool, and it gives players more access to teams and players, which is, I mean, fans more access to teams and players, which is great.
Well, it gives everybody access to each other. I mean, you can sit there and like you said, the fantasy part. I haven't touched on that. I've just kind of used it for more currency. Um, and, I've talked to people, I've talked to Ben about, the NFTs of buying things. And I listen to Pat McAfee quite a bit, and he talks about
Mhm.
these NFT cards that he gets, like, every now and then. Um, and it's like that's kind of how you can put money into stuff and then you can resell them. And honestly, it turns into your own kind of stock trading, I guess, if you will, is because you're owning it, and you're buying these things for, what you value them at, and you can sell them for what you think you can take it off to. So like I said, I think for athletes, it's something that's growing. It's grown on me quite a bit, because like I said, when you're dealing with foreign exchange money, and you got to bring it back in currency and everything like that, it's NFT and stuff like that. It's a universally, it's the same. It's going to cost the same regardless of where you're at.
Yeah, it's gonna be easier than trying to wait for cash to get out of Russia, especially now too.
Well, like, it would have taken us, probably 5 months to get the money back, or we could have transferred over into some crypto. And, we use that locker token and use that, and, sit there, and then you have it, and that you have it, and it's in, currency, and then you can sit there and transfer back to your bank, and it's a heck of a lot easier, and you're not dealing with all right, well, my money might be gone in Russia, so I don't know where that's at. And then you're sitting there going, well, I just earned all that money, but I might never see it again. So it was a no-brainer for me to kind of get into it.
Well, Steven, thanks so much for joining us, and good luck. Where's the plan next year? Where are we going? Give this the inside
I don't,
scoop.
I have no idea yet.
No idea. Well, text me when you figure it out. Let
Yeah,
me
we'll
know.
figure it out once we kind of have an idea. It'll be kind of easy. But obviously with what's going on in Arizona, we'll figure out what's next for us. And we'll go from there.
Well, best of luck, buddy, and thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Steve, for coming on. Obviously, it's tough to get some people on here in the summertime. We have a lot of people on vacation, so I can't thank him enough for taking time out of his very busy schedule to jump on the show. Really enjoyed sitting down and talking to him. Like I said, I was a big fan of him when he was with the Rangers. I followed his career, obviously followed him when he was in the Olympics with Team USA. I can say this now, he was the best defenseman at the Olympics for the Team USA that year. So I can't thank him enough for coming on, and I really appreciate him. And again, shout out to D Sports Alliance for setting that up, and my guy Ben over there for setting up the interview. So thank you so much to them. And that does it for episode 135 of the Broadway Hat Podcast. Make sure you go and subscribe to the show and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Every 5-star review the show does receive $1 is donated to Alex's Lemonade Foundation. So please take a moment out of your day, leave us a 5-star review, and help an amazing cause fight pediatric cancer. Make sure you go subscribe to the show on Spotify as well. Leave us a 5-star review. You can find the show on Google Play, Pandora, Amazon Music, anywhere you get your podcast, you can find us there. Make sure you also follow the show on social media as well. On Twitter at Broadway Hat Pod. You can find my personal Twitter account at KHallNY for all New York Ranger updates. Also, make sure you check out all my latest articles on BellyUpSports.com. Like I said, I have a new article coming out this week on the Rangers free agency options. Make sure you go and follow the show on Instagram and Facebook at the Broadway Hat Podcast. And thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.